We are deep into the 2024 NFL playoffs, and teams compete year in and year out with one goal in mind. That, of course, is to win a Super Bowl. And obviously, in order to win a Super Bowl, you have to have a collection of great players to be able to achieve that goal. But with the way NFL contracts are structured, there's a lot of great players on rookie scale contracts, meaning they are underpaid relative to the production they bring to their team. And a good example of that would be Brian Thomas Jr. of the Jags or Brock Bowers of the Raiders. But there's other players that had great individual 2024 seasons and will be compensated this offseason. Whether it's by their current team or not, we will soon find out, but in today's video we will discuss potential compensation, contract length, and whether or not they go to a new team in free agency. Each player's individual situation is complex and there is a lot to break down in today's video, and without further ado, let's begin. And we are starting today's video with Bengals receiver T. Higgins. T was a second-round pick back in 2020, and it may seem like T has been in the league for forever now, but he will enter the 2025 season at just 26 years old. And one of the biggest things when discussing free agency is having a player coming off of a career year, while also being young enough to be productive for the potential next team they play for. And despite T being a 5-year veteran, he could absolutely play 5 years for another franchise and be the focal point of another team's offense over the course of the next few years. He finished the 2024 season with 911 yards and 10 touchdowns in just 12 games. T was on a different level in 2024, and had he played a full 17-game season, he would have been on pace for a 103 catch, 1,291 yard, 14 touchdown season right before he was due to get paid. Higgins is in a unique situation because he's currently on the Bengals, who of course have one of the best quarterbacks in football in Joe Burrow. But the big reason why I think T. Higgins will not be a Bengal in 2025 is because his other teammate Jamar Chase has to get paid too. And paying a quarterback and two receivers a combined $120 million per season is quite a bit of money. And it may be even more depending on how much Jamar Chase receives. I get $120 million from 55 from Joe Burrow, 35 from Jamar, although it may be more because he will probably top Justin Jefferson's contract from last year, which had Justin Jefferson an average annual value of $35 million per year. So 55 from Burrow and 35 from Jamar would have those two alone at 90, and I would be surprised if the Bengals wanted to pay T. Higgins 30 per year, and I would also be surprised if T would be open to taking a multiple $1 million pay cut when other teams will certainly give him $30 million per year to be their wide receiver one for the next couple of seasons. We've discussed this before on the channel, but when contracts are guaranteed, owners have to come up with the guaranteed part of the contract, and the money goes into a separate account. And there's a reason the Bengals changed the name of their stadium in recent years, which was to Paycor Stadium, and that was to be able to raise capital for the contracts they knew were coming. Burrow has of course already been paid, and now it's time for Jamar and T to both get paid as well. They would be able to tag and trade T. Higgins, and with teams like the Patriots, Raiders, Commanders, and Chargers all having the cap space available to be able to pay him and healthily compensate him, I think T is going to be on another team next year. Because T was a 21-year-old rookie during the 2020 season 5 years ago, he will have the rare opportunity to be able to test free agency multiple times in his career. And because of this, I would like to think that T signs a 3-year deal so he can test the free agency market in a couple of years too. And there's a chance by that time that there is an added 18th game, which would increase the salaries for everyone, not just T. Higgins. Right now, I think a 3-year $90 million deal to a team like the Patriots makes the most sense because of how much cap space they have available, while also helping out Drake May in his rookie contract window. T would get compensated, the Patriots would finally have a good receiver, and the Bengals would probably get a second-round pick back from the presumable trade, and I think this would be pretty close to a win-win for everyone, at least with how business goes in the NFL. But the projected contract for T. Higgins is 3 years worth $90 million. Next up is Chase Young, and like with T. Higgins, he was a part of the 2020 draft class, and I think there needs to be some context around who Chase Young is as a player. Whenever people hear the name Chase Young, they roll their eyes and think of the guy selected immediately after Joe Burrow and how hyped he was as a prospect coming out of Ohio State back in 2020. And Chase Young was a very, very good pass rushing prospect that year, and unfortunately he did not live up to the hype of being the number 2 overall pick really outside of his rookie year, in which he was a Pro Bowler and was the defensive Defensive Rookie of the Year. He tore his ACL and his patellar tendon in 2021 and had a long recovery back, and in 2023, he had a pretty good season all things considered. He had 66 pressures and had 7.5 sacks with split time between Washington and San Francisco. In 2024, he also had 66 pressures, but only had 5.5 sacks, but what I think needs to be remembered is 66 pressures in back-to-back years and having those multiple years of good sample sizes is critical for knowing who Chase Young is as a player. He finished top 15 in pressures in 2024, and what I think needs to be acknowledged about Chase Young is he's not this all-time draft bust the way some people want to make him out to be. Is he a draft disappointment? I think you could argue that because he will probably be on his 4th team in a span of 5 total years, but he's not a draft bust, and any coach would take 65 plus pressures at the snap of a finger. Your favorite team would gladly take Chase Young, and I think he will have a considerable amount of teams interested in bringing him in 2025. One team that I think makes a tremendous amount of sense for Chase Young entering the 2025 season is the Arizona Cardinals. Their leading pass rusher in 2024 only had 31 total pressures, and Chase, obviously, if you can do math quick, more than doubled 30 plus pressures in 2024. And one other thing that I do think should be noted about Chase Young is he's probably not going to be an 11, 12, or 13 sack type of year player, and that's fine because he's not expected to be that type of guy at this point in his career. Sacking the quarterback is a skill, and it's one that I don't think Chase Young has, at least not at an elite level. It's another thing to generate pressures and have those 65 plus pressures, and then to have 14 or 15 sacks and to be able to routinely get after the quarterback. And I also think that's a big key in scouting draft prospects, is if a guy can't consistently sack the quarterback at college, more often than not, he's probably not going to consistently sack the quarterback in the NFL. Obviously, there's exceptions, but the point is Chase Young has 13 sacks over the past 2 years, and Chase has had 130 plus pressures in the last 2 seasons combined, and he will have a lot of teams interested in his services. Now, because he's not the 13 or 14 or 15 sack guy, and I will say he will enter the 2025 season at just 26 years old, so there is a very real chance that in 1 year he really blows up and has a 12 or 14 sack season. I don't want to say that that's impossible, but he will not get the 25, 26, much less 30 million per year, and I think Chase will be right around 18 to 21 million dollars per season, and the Cardinals quietly have a considerable amount of cap space, and I think it would make a lot of sense for Chase to sign either another 1-year prove-it deal or a 2-year deal in the ballpark of 40 to 42 total million dollars. At that point, Chase would be a 28-year-old free agent, and if Arizona likes what he's doing and he can become a 65 plus pressure year guy in addition to having 9 or 10 sacks, then they would probably like to extend him even further past that. Chase Young and a player I like a lot in BJ Ojulari, who unfortunately missed the 2024 season due to a knee injury, would be a very good pass rushing duo, and the Cardinals desperately need pass rushing help. I would also like the Falcons to go after Chase Young, though I don't think that's a reality from a financial perspective because they have a lot of money committed to guys like Kirk Cousins and Chris Lindstrom for reference, and I don't think Chase would go there, nor do I think they could actually put together an offer that would legitimately interest Chase. The Lions also have a considerable amount of cap space, and he could sign a 1-year prove-it deal there too. The jury is out on where Chase will sign in 2025, but I think he will be in the ballpark of 18 to 21 million dollars per year and probably be a 60 plus pressure per year guy the way he has been over the past 2 years. He is only 26 years old and he's had back-to-back 60 plus pressure seasons, which is absolutely a positive as we enter the NFL offseason. Chase Young, to me at this point, is a bit of an underrated player because I think people have this narrative in their head that he's a draft disappointment and that he couldn't possibly turn his career around. But he very quietly has, and he will get compensated in a big way this offseason. Trey Smith of the Chiefs is up, and obviously when you think of the Chiefs, you probably think of Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, and Andy Reid, and obviously all 4 of those guys are vital to the Chiefs' success, but every NFL team wishes they had a player like Trey Smith. He's 6'5", 320, and benched 225 32 times during his pro day back in 2021. He's a mountain of a man and an absolute road grader in the run game, and I would be pretty surprised if he's a Chief in 2025 for a couple of reasons. This was a point we alluded to in the intro, but teams having high levels of play on the rookie scale contract is critical to their success because you can only have so many guys that are getting paid top dollar, and there's a reason the NFL draft is as critical as it is. You have to be be able to replenish talent every year, or have the wherewithal to look ahead and to think about replacing the next guy who may leave in free agency. And Trey Smith is a former 6th round pick who had cap hits of less than $1 million in each of his first 3 years before having a cap hit of $3.3 million in 2024, and this is per Spotrac.com. Trey will receive quite the payday this offseason, as we've seen guards like Landon Dickerson, Chris Lindstrom, Quentin Nelson, and Robert Hunt all receive contracts at or above an average of $20 million per year, and good for them as they get compensated for their hard work while also setting their families up for generations of success. But the way NFL contracts usually work is it's usually the next guy up who breaks records and sets the new bar for contracts at the position, and obviously quarterback is the most publicized and most talked about position in all of sports, but with how many young quarterbacks there are across the NFL, the absolute last thing teams want is continuous pressure in the face of their franchise. I look at a team like the Chargers, who have over $60 million in cap space this offseason, and a team like the Vikings, who also have $60 million, as two teams that could bring in Trey Smith. Trey is a player who you can insert on nearly any team, and he would be an upgrade, but one other team that I think makes a lot of sense for him to go to is the Tennessee Titans. It is absolutely worth noting the Titans hired a new general manager between the time we released the Titans video last week and the time this video was released, and now former Chiefs assistant general manager Mike Borgonzi. One of the biggest things that I don't think gets talked about enough with the Chiefs is I don't think we see the Chiefs win 3 Super Bowls in 5 years and be the Kansas City Chiefs we know them as today without getting absolutely killed in Super Bowl 55 against the Bucs. I go back to that game a lot in terms of how to build a football team because that was the Chiefs at the peak of their power. That was a team who put up 38 points 2 weeks prior in the AFC Championship game, only to put up 9 total points in the Super Bowl and to get Patrick Mahomes killed in the process. Mike Borgonzi knows just how vital it is to build the interior part of the offensive line because he's seen it firsthand. And I think any team with a young quarterback makes a lot of sense for Trey because cost here will not be the issue. If I had to project a contract for Trey Smith, keep in mind he will only be 26 years old at the start of the 2025 season. I would very much expect a 3-year deal in the area of $63 to $65 million. Like with T. Higgins, he will be able to test free agency again in a couple of short years. Next up is Sam Darnold of the Minnesota Vikings, and I know with Sam Darnold everybody has the same thought, so we'll just go ahead and address the elephant in the room right from the start. Yes, the Vikings were 14-2 entering the Week 18 game against the Lions with the number 1 seed on the line. Yes, Sam Darnold did not have a good game, and he missed several receivers in the red zone, and at a point the Vikings only had 6 total points in the red zone on 4 offensive drives. Aaron Glenn called a great game, and Sam Darnold also missed several receivers in the red zone, including Jordan Addison to multiple touchdowns, and Justin Jefferson on a ball that was just out of his reach. There was a chance to rewrite the narrative a week later on Monday night in a playoff game against the Rams, and Darnold was sacked 9 times and did not play well, and the Vikings lost by 3 scores, and the season was over just like that. Now, there is a lot to discuss with Sam Darnold because he had a good year. He threw 35 touchdowns to 12 interceptions. He finished top 5 in passing touchdowns in 2024, and that is something that nobody saw coming. And if you are a Vikings fan thinking that you saw that coming from Sam Darnold, I would probably say you're lying because that was a very unexpected season from not just Darnold, but for everybody. But when you look at teams like the Raiders, who fielded Gardner Minshew and Nate O'Connell for most of the year, or the Giants, who had just 15 touchdowns to 13 interceptions as a team in all of 2024, a mark that Sam had cleared through the first 8 games, by the way, as he had 17 touchdowns to 7 interceptions through 8 games, including a 28-6 win over the Giants in the season opener. Do you really think that they're going to sit there and say, you know what? We had terrible quarterback play all year. We're just going to go ahead and try and roll into 2025 with Drew Lock or with Gardner Minshew. And Sam Darnold he's just simply not good enough for us because he really peed his pants when it mattered most. No, Sam Darnold is going to get a lot of money this year. Now, in the sense of the total contract value, and that is where I would probably reason with you and say the lights were too bright for him and that's a tough look to give Sam a multiple year contract. But for a team to give Sam a 1-year $40 million deal based on how he played in 2024, I would would be extremely surprised if it's not at least $40 million based on the player we saw this past year. You could also even argue a team like the Titans, who have the #1 pick, could bring in Sam Darnold for a year and use the #1 pick on a player like Abdul Carter from Penn State. Pittsburgh also makes a lot of sense because Russell Wilson wasn't exactly great during the 2024 season, and Justin Fields is more of a wild card at this point than what we saw from Darnold in 2024. Projecting Justin Fields to play at the level that we saw Darnold play at in 2024 is exactly what that sounds like at this point, a projection. At no point has Justin Fields ever played at the level that Darnold did this past year. So Sam Darnold will absolutely get a lot of money, and I think it will come from one of the 4 teams that we mentioned, the Raiders, Giants, Titans, or Steelers. But one way or another, he will be heavily compensated this offseason. Stefon Diggs will be entering year 11 in 2025 and will turn 32 in November of 2025, so I think at this point he will probably be looking to ring chase, as he is a free agent too. And the Commanders are having quite the season, and they also need a lot of receiver help. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Diggs took a slight hometown discount to play for the Washington Commanders and to pair up with Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin, who outside of Terry were not a really good supporting cast for Jaden in his rookie year, and Stefon Diggs going home to play for the Commanders is a player and team pairing that I like quite a bit. And as you can see on the screen right now, there are a couple of other free agents that I think get hefty contracts this offseason, and potentially a couple of team pairings with them as well. That's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 45% of people watching are subscribed and helps the channel tremendously. The goal is 200,000 subs by the NFL draft, and until next time, as always, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.